later. I'm delighted to welcome Gavin Ingham to the You and Your Business studio. Hiya, Gavin.
Hi, Alec. How you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks very much. I
Looking
have
forward
prepped
to
you
it.
slightly. I have prepped you slightly. I told you I'm going to take you back to your last year in school. Or were you the high achiever? Were you the person who had a plan, or were you just going to clear off around the world and enjoy life?
Well, I was kind of somewhere in between. If you go back a couple of years prior to that, I was definitely the high achiever. I was looking at Oxbridge, being an academic, but unfortunately, my father died in a car accident, and
Oh,
that just
wow.
kind of kicked me off the rails. And
Yeah.
probably the best way of summing it up is my mum went in to see the teachers just before I left school. And she said to my form teacher, how is he going to do in his A levels? And the form teacher described me as the laid back golden boy and concluded that I could get three A's or three E's. He had absolutely no idea. And in the event, I hit somewhere in the middle.
All right. Okay. So you've hit in the middle. No clear direction of where you're going. So what did you do?
Great question. Well, I literally racked my brains going, what do I do in this scenario? I mean, clearly I could have still gone to a university, but again, I didn't really want to. And I think at that point I'd realized you're not academic. I like
Right.
learning when there's a real reason, but I'm not into just academic learning. So I felt that even if I went to somewhere, I would probably not deliver what I wanted to deliver. So I
Sure.
just looked at my life and went, well, what do I enjoy? What do I like? And there wasn't a lot. But the one thing I did like was cop shows. Miami Vice, Dempsey Makepeace, the professionals. I know they're not cops, etc. But I had them all bundled into the same lot. So I thought that could be exciting. I knew I live in West Yorkshire and I knew that wouldn't be exciting, although actually it might have been. So I joined the Met
Yeah.
in London. It wasn't quite what I expected, but nonetheless, that's what I did.
So you weren't sort of propelled into the world of the plainclothes detectives and fast cars and all of
I
that.
was not, no. And I can honestly say, plainclothes detective, I did know a few, but fast cars, boats, and pet alligators, not so much in West London.
Yeah, Miami Vice. My goodness, that takes me back some time. So tell me, so you were being institutionalized, but I sense that you're not an institutionalized type person.
No, look, on the one hand, I did really enjoy it, and I felt, you can have your own opinions about the police and what have you, but certainly, I mean, one of the things I would say is that you can't look at the police and say that's what they are as an institution. Because even if you looked
Sure.
at our police station, the institution, there were four reliefs: A relief, B relief, C relief, D relief. And at any one time, one of them would be on. And
Right.
how you got treated and what you thought of the police in our area would be dependent on which relief. So even the reliefs
Oh,
had massively different cultures. So my relief, I really liked. We were run by a couple of family men, and I really did quite enjoy it. But I also felt I'm not really going anywhere here, and and again, I'd have had to sit down and sit exams, which I wasn't that interested in to get promoted
right.
in. And I wanted something where I really could be rewarded as an individual for what I do as an individual. And I just felt I never would get that in the police. So I left.
Okay, so what direction did you take? Where were you going to go after
Well,
this?
the irony is at that point I had absolutely no idea, Alec, and I sort of I sort of sat at a girlfriend's house for a while, and she said to me, "This isn't what I signed up for, really. You need to go and get a job." And I said, What am I going to go and do?" And she suggested sales. And funnily
All right.
enough, my headmaster at school, when I failed, not failed, but when I didn't get what I might have liked to have got for my A levels, he suggested sales too, which I rejected at the
Oh,
time. And then a whole lot of other people went, "You've got the gift of the gab," which, of course, if you know anything about sales, is not what makes a great salesperson, but that's what everybody thinks. And I thought, maybe. And so I went into a sales role, Alec.
all right. Okay. And what sort of organization were you working for? Small, large, and what sector?
So I was working for a large SME in the IT recruitment sector, which was pretty booming at that point of time, and actually a really good
Sure.
place to start because it's very proactive. And I think if you're going to go into sales and then subsequently run your own business, understanding proactivity and the link between action and results is a really, really important one to learn. So yeah, I moved there and realized I had a bit of a knack for it, really.
Well, I tell you, if you can cut your teeth in HR and HR recruitment, you're doing well.
Yeah, it was certainly a competitive industry at the time, and I think even though it was the 90s, we were coming off the back of the 80s, and
Right.
so there was still quite a lot of that cut and thrust and energy, and it was all on the phone, of course, in those days because it was prior. I mean, we did have computers, but they didn't really do anything. CVs were still on paper, really.
Right.
It was very much phone, Rolodex. CVs on paper. So it's very much about those
Yeah.
connections and those conversations you had with people.
I mean, sort of IT recruitment then as opposed to now must have been two totally different animals altogether.
Yeah, I'm not too involved with IT recruitment these days,
Oh, I know that, yeah.
but yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a very different. Yeah, it certainly taught you about competition, which since my running days I'd never had really in a work environment. People competing, even when you had a CV and you had a job, somebody else might be trying to put the CV in somewhere else. So you've even got that
Right.
competition going on. And that I think that cut and thrust of
Sure.
really competing to win something really fed the energy in me that wanted to be responsible for my own results and my own life.
Yeah, no, that sounds just as we're talking about it running, what distance did you like running?
400 and 800. Yeah.
400 and 800. Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. So, okay, so you're in that company, but there's other opportunities arising. So, what next for you?
Well, I was with the company. I became the top performer, got promoted, and was not really thinking about doing anything else. And somebody approached me, a headhunter, with an opportunity, and it was a well-paid opportunity to do a setup. And just the way it was structured made sense. It was a larger company who were twinned with a small company, and the guy couldn't do it. I'd thought he might be able
Right.
to do, but needed an expert. So effectively, I was able to do exactly what I wanted, i.e., almost really set up my own company, but without worrying about the admin and logistics side of it, but also with a larger company where there was an international sales director who also interviewed me, even though I had nothing to do with him. And he was there for me to
Right.
talk to and stuff like that. And I thought he would make a really good mentor as well. So it was a really good one. And I spent several years there actually. And we took that to quite a decent size, and I really enjoyed that because I got to drive it and I got to do it, but without any of the hassles of running the company.
Fantastic. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to me, Alec Drew, on You and Your Business, where my guest today is Gavin Ingham. And we're just talking about this part of your career. So, sales, obviously, this was something that you did have a talent for, and you had an enthusiasm because you were being rewarded by what
Sure.
you were able to achieve. Where next? Were you going to stay in that path, or where were you going to take yourself to?
Well, I I, I was enjoying that, but I reached a point where the managing director that I was working for, he was quite a lot older than me, and we just wanted different things, really. I was in my 20s. He was in his
Right.
late 40s. I was thinking what happens in the next 2, 3 years. He was thinking, well, what happens through to my retirement here? And it just gave us a very different sort of longer term aim. And I think after a few years, that began to become obvious.
Right.
So
Okay.
I wasn't really looking, but I thought I probably need to do something different here. And an opportunity came to work for
All
a
right.
larger corporate, managing a much larger team. And I thought, well, actually, that would be a really great experience because it takes me into corporate and it gives me that experience of managing rather than a couple of teams. It gives me the ability to manage multiple teams and multiple people, and really step away from actually being day-to-day sales myself. And so I went and did that. The interesting thing with that one, of course, was that actually I realized I really like doing stuff. I really like being involved in the
All
cut and
right.
thrust of a sale. I really like being involved in the coaching. I didn't like the back end stuff and sitting in the board meetings and all that sort of stuff as much.
Yeah, they're called board meetings for a particular reason, you know. And yeah, I think, but you have all of the sort of talents that people in sales have. They're great at the doing, but hate all of the support that you have to do around it. You know, it's often how many salespeople get stifled in organizations. How
True,
did
that's
you
true.
manage that? But you had the support around you. How did you
Oh yeah,
manage it?
I had a very good support team, and I probably would have stayed there longer than I did, despite the frustrations that come with working for a larger corporate. You know, I was able in my previous job to be able to remove people quite quickly if they were dragging the team down. You know, as soon as you've got an internal HR department and an internal legal
All right.
person, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But what actually caused me to leave was two things coinciding, two planets clashed together really. One
Right.
was we were doing a restructure within the business for reasons that don't matter now. But there was a restructure between the recruitment companies and the other side of the business, which was the bigger side. And I was therefore either going to become MD of the division, which I wasn't that keen on. My ego wanted it. But as I've already said, it
Right.
probably didn't fit me that much. Or there were other opportunities in the larger organization. But right as this conversation was going on, there was an advert in the Sunday Times. Do you remember that? When
Oh,
there used to be
yeah.
adverts in the Sunday Times. And
Adverts on papers, yes,
on
do
paper,
remember
yeah.
them.
And it was the best one I've ever seen. It was for a high performance coaching company. And it was coaching into companies like, I'm pretty much sure they said Coca-Cola, PricewaterhouseCoopers, you know, massive global
Yeah.
brands. And you'd be doing a combination of keynote speaking and high performance coaching. And just the way it was written, I was into personal development and personal leaders, but I just thought that is my perfect job. So because all of
Right.
this stuff was going on, I applied. And you know, they interviewed hundreds of people, and I was one of two who got it. So really, at that
Fantastic.
point, that made my decision for me to move in that direction, and that was 2001.
Wow, 2001, that rings a bell. What happened?
I got verbally offered the job about 3 days before the Twin Towers went down, and the corporate field for that kind of work changed dramatically like that overnight, and they withdrew the permanent offer, but offered me what they called an associate contract, which actually turned out to be really good because it meant if they had requirement, I would get paid for what I delivered.
All
But
right.
in the meantime, they would coach me, train me. So I got the most amazing coaching and support and training that I would never have got, never been able to access, and never been able to afford. So, you know, it was amazing for me. And I did do some work for them over the years as well. But what it meant was actually I needed to set my own organization up. I needed to become a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, if you like, rather than going and working for somebody else. And I wonder, with my background, my parents were teachers,
Right.
very sort of small C conservative, very much go and work for a big organization that will look after you. I don't know how easily I would have made that move without that. So it just worked out really well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Often we're sort of influenced by our parents. I had the same. Why I entered the bank was safe, pensionable job for life.
Exactly.
It's not quite what I wanted. Maybe now, as I've got older, it would be very handy.
Sure.
Um, but you found yourself into a sort of whole new dynamic within your life, and
Sure.
obviously it sounds all like exciting times, and also the fact that you had time to be able to, take advantage of all this coaching and mentoring and everything. So you must have been
I
set
think
up
it's
with the
really
right set of
important. I
tools
think
to
it's
get
really
out there.
important. Yeah, I think it's really important because people say to me, "What do you want?" And bear in mind, I was coming out of corporate, so I had some money. So my aim for the first year was I want to try and get. I remember reading something Anthony Robbins said once, and he said most people in their first year as a speaker can't get speeches, so they speak 10, 15 times in the year. He said, in
Yeah.
my first year, I would speak at the opening of a paper bag. So he said, I spoke at 150 speeches in my first year. I'm making the figures up. But anyway, the argument was that in one
Well,
year, he got 10 years of experience. And so I
wow.
took that view and I thought, I'm going to take everything they give to me. And I don't care if I get to the end of the year and I've made zero money. I want to get this huge acceleration. Now, as it happened, I made money as well, but that wasn't the intention. The intention was, as you say, to just use that coaching, training, development, opportunity. Again, speaking with clients you probably wouldn't have got in front of by yourself in your first year.
Wow. Yeah, and so the sort of key part of all of this, you talked about Tony Robbins. Obviously, he had an influence on what you were going to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, not that I didn't want to be Anthony Robbins or anything like that. I never wanted to even work B2C, which is clearly where he is. But
Yeah.
certainly he was one of the people who, if you went back when I was early in sales, I got into his stuff. And it was,
Mm.
Anthony Robbins, into Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn, into
Oh,
Stephen Covey, then into NLP and out to etc. So I kind of went broader into that stuff. But Anthony Robbins was, if you like, my gateway drug. He was the person that I came across first. And before him, I didn't even realize that, personal development was a thing.
right. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Gavin Ingham. My goodness, you're throwing so much at me, Gavin. I'm nearly getting confused with my own script here. Um, okay, so you now have picked up all the skills that you needed. What are you going to do next with that? Back into corporate, or was there a hankering to do something for yourself?
No, I think somewhere around that point, because at that point I also had a relationship with a sales training company. So I was doing a little bit
Right,
of sales training as well. So I'm doing some training, a tiny bit of coaching, and virtually no keynote speaking.
all right,
And if you look at the 21 years I've been in the industry, probably the first 5 stayed pretty much like that.
right.
But then what I decided is I wanted to do more bigger audiences. And I started running some open seminars, so pay per ticket. And I formed a couple of relationships with 2 different people who helped promote those. And so I did a lot of sort of 100-person-ish seminars around
Right.
sales and motivation. And the more I did of those, people come to me off the back of those and say, would you fancy doing a keynote? And the more keynotes I did, the more I thought, yeah, I love this keynoting thing. I love standing on a stage with the bigger audiences. So that became my sort of focus. How do I get more keynote speeches, do masterclasses off the back of that, and sort of stop doing the training, or stop doing as much of the training for sure. And really that just became my focus. And from there, I became this speaker on high performance and started to, I think one of the things that happens in that period, or it certainly did for me,
Right.
was you start to take all the little lessons that you've got from your life and all of the
Right.
lessons that you've taught, and you start asking yourself, well, what are the big ones? What are the ones that really made a difference for me? And that's when you start to come up with your own ideas and your own structures. And so it was probably sometime during that period when I came up with the IM10 system for high performance, which is all about helping people to get clarity on what they want, helping them to get the conviction to be able to deliver on it, and helping them to get that all important consistency of delivery. It's not, we talked about this before, it's not what you know, it's what you
Yeah.
do that actually delivers the high performance. If high performance was knowing something, the world would be full of high performance, but of course it's not.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge because we've all seen it, these people pouring out of a conference after hearing a speaker punch in the air, and by the time they get back to the hotel, they're totally deflated.
Yeah, I never wanted to be that. So I am, people will say he's motivational, he passes the mojo, he's funny, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's important, but I never wanted to be that. I remember doing a speech quite early on where I happened to be on stage with someone quite famous. We'll just leave it at that. And they had everybody up to the front of the stage, and they were all kind of punching the air and whooping together in a big crew and put him closer, whoop, 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 And I just thought, does this deliver anything? It's great
No.
now, and everybody's going to walk out and write, he was awesome, but does it change anything tomorrow? Do they do anything different tomorrow as a result of this? And I looked at the Anthony Robbins, and I love Anthony Robbins, don't get me wrong. And loads of people have changed their lives as a result of Anthony Robbins' stuff. But actually, the people who stay around Anthony Robbins, they tend to be the people who are going in for that injection, or going in for that injection, or going in for that injection. And I always wanted to
Yeah.
try and deliver something, deliver a system that people could use that would allow them to do it for themselves. I guess teach a man to fish, not keep going behind him and saying, come on, we're fishing.
I mean, would you like to share with our audience maybe one or two key things that you found made a substantial difference to the audience in them having the ability then to act upon what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a speaking perspective is different from the skills perspective, as it were. But from a speaking perspective, yeah, I think to engage an audience, you need to meet that audience where they are. And I think people
Right.
make a big mistake with that. A lot of people. So they have this idea that they're a motivational speaker and they walk in all woo, 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 but the
Mm.
audience is all, and you can't do that. Maybe you can if you're famous, right? I don't know, but you can't if you're you or me, because they just go, who's this guy? So I think the first thing is you've got to be looking at your audience, you've got to assess your audience, you've got to meet them in their world. Then what you do is you've got to
Sure.
pick it up and you've got to bring them up to where you want them to be from an energy perspective. You've got to get that rapport and energy with them. That's critical, because if you don't get that, then you can't
Right.
deliver the messages that you want. I found that one of the best ways to do that, or the two best ways to do that, are through backwards forwards interaction and being really natural, and through stories, really emotional stories that engage people, those universal
Right.
stories that people just sit there and think, yeah, that's me. I mean, you've experienced that when you've been giving talks, right? You
Sure.
tell a story and people come up to you and they go, that was me.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I felt. And you think, yeah, that's exactly how everybody feels. That's the skill of the story, right? But I think what that
Mm.
does, then it opens things up. I think the second thing then is you've got to know, what is the core message? And you might have 3 messages, 5 messages, 7 messages, but what's the one? So for me, the key is, what is the one thing you want them to walk away with? Because again, what happens a lot of the time is people walk into a training program, they walk into a seminar, they walk into a workshop, they walk into a keynote speech, and it's like smorgasbord is laid out in front of them. And they've got
Mm.
like, oh, that's good. Oh, I quite like that. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, and they walk out and you've no idea what they're going to take from it. And that's great
Right.
on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you've got a corporate in front of you, that's not what they want. They want one overriding message. Is they want people to be able to walk out and talk about it, having had something of a similar experience, so that they can pick that up and do something with it. So for me, as I say, it's about matching the audience, it's about picking the audience up, it's about getting that engagement, it's about using stories to get that emotional connection, and then it's about working
Sure.
out what's that one core thing that you're going to just build everything around, so that when they leave, they know what to do. And then the final thing, I suppose, is a call to action. So a lot of speeches
Right.
just finish, and it's like, well, okay, I know you were paid to deliver it, and I know you've delivered it. I know there was a beginning, a middle, and an end, but actually, there needs to be an action. You need to loop people forward into what
Yes.
next. And it doesn't have to be you, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but they need to go and do something, don't they? So that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And in terms of leadership as well, which is, I know, something you have a passion for, uh, tell me what makes a good leader.
Gosh, that's a deep, deep question, isn't it? For
Well, you
me,
don't have a lot of time for it.
so I don't have a lot of time, so I've got to keep it fairly light and frothy, haven't I? I think it's somebody who cares, genuinely cares about their team, and genuinely seeks to understand their team. And I'm going to say again, let's keep the one point, right? I think someone
Yeah.
who is prepared to meet their team where they are. I think a lot of people build their dreams on quicksand. Um,
Yes.
they and I think it's getting worse because of social media. My wife in the first lockdown, she got quite annoyed with what a great time other people were having. And you would see these pictures on social media of people in the garden, and they'd be barbecuing, and the children would be floating in the air, and there'd be this sprinkler catching the rainbow over the light. And my wife had turned to ours, who'd been rolling around the floor covered in dirt, fighting each other, and my wife's pulling her hair out and what have you. And she'd say, it's just other people are having such a great time. And I'd say, no, other people posted a great picture that's been through 57 million filters and probably has
Yes.
bits cut from other pictures and bears no resemblance to the world that they are living in. And I think the problem is, a lot of the time we like to pretend that that's our team, or we like to pretend that that's our reality. So for me, it's meeting both yourself and your team where you truly are, because then you can build that empathy, you can understand what's important to people, you can create a vision together. But you can't do any of that if you start on quicksand. So if I'm going to go for one point that's slightly different probably than what people say, it's meet yourself and meet your teams where you really are.
I think that's a very, very important message. And I suppose in the sort of just under 2 minutes we've got left, what next for Gavin Ingham, and also where people can find out much more about you?
Sure. The best place to find out more about me is either gaviningham.com, or I post daily normally on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's a great place to communicate. Um, Next for me, I have a really good newsletter as well, which is available on gaviningham.com. So, subscribe to that if you'd like to hear more. Next for me, I've got my aim is to help more business owners, more leaders all around the world to have more conviction in what they do, more clarity. And the really important bit is build that consistency. So, it's that difference between what you know and what you do. That's my big thing, because high performance, it's not about magic. It's about turning up and doing what you need to do, whether that's at home, with that quality time with your children or your wife, whether it's as a leader where you've got that time for your team, or whether it's in sales, turning up and doing what you need to do on a daily basis. And next for me is just to build out more keynotes, more programs, and more ways to help people to do that all around the world.
Good. And I suppose now that we've finished the lockdown, hopefully, touch wood and all of that, we never know what's coming next. Are you going to be touring again soon?
Yeah, I am. I've got a few gigs in the diary now, and we've put our first open seminar in, which is a sales one in November. So it's gradually picking up, and I don't want to do as many as I did prior to lockdown. But yes, definitely, I love. We talked about this before. I love the energy of being. It's not just about the speeches. It's not about being on the stage. It's actually about visiting places and meeting the clients and chatting with the audience afterwards and everything. And you don't get that the same. I love this. I love it, but it's not the same. And I want both in my life.